Hi, this is Siofra Brad again, and this is Siofra's Magic Alcove. So, coming up with a subject this week was a little bit difficult. I wasn't being inspired. None of the groups I'm in had any questions that I thought were of note. Of course, we just had EMOLC, which is Bridget's Day, and so everyone was talking about that, which is not a fine, it's a fine thing to talk about, but we do have some videos on that subject. So I was racking my brains, and it suddenly came to me, I guess last evening, I think, that it might be worthwhile to try and do a video about becoming clear, because that is the goal. Um, at least it seems so to me. And what do I mean by becoming clear? And what are the stumbling blocks and or whatever. We'll see. You know how I am. We'll see what comes out of my mouth when it comes out of my mouth in some cases. So, thinking about what it means to be clear, it's like there's a few things that stand out. For one, other people's responses, reactions, feelings, impressions, um, good or bad, doesn't matter, don't mean much anymore. Because a person who is clear knows who they are, who they want to be, and other people's opinions aren't part of that at that point. I mean, we have a hard time, all of us go through different stages before we can get to that point for sure, where it's important to us what our friends in school think about us, or the people we're closest to, or our parents, our family, our siblings, our teachers, all of these people that seem to be bigger than life or have more knowledge than we do or have a huge impact on our development. And it's not unnatural for us to look to them for advice and information and assistance and explanation and all those other things. But when you're at the point where if you think that they disapprove or disagree with something that you're doing or something you've said, then that becomes like a devastating blow. That's not where we want to be. Um, I know I've said this more than once that what the universe and the trees think of me is more important to me than what the people think of me. And the reason for that is that most of us are not very clear at all. We're involved in projecting ourselves, our fears, anxieties, our hopes, and our dreams onto other people. And then having expectations about how that person is going to respond to us, and what that means as far as a future together or friendship, relationship, whatever it happens to be. And between projection and expectation, we don't really see what's really going on because we can't. Because all we're interacting with and seeing are those projections and expectations. If we're like looking for the perfect relationship and we have in our head what that means, whether we're a man or a woman doesn't matter, and whether the partner we're looking for is a man or a woman doesn't matter, the dynamics are the same. The idealized person, the person that understands us, comprehends us, will stand by us, will support us, will agree with us, will be like in our corner, will complete us. All of these things are projections. Because in reality, no one can do that. Not in reality. Only in fantasy can that happen. And coming from the idealized ideals of the perfect spouse or perfect partner, and learning to accept the reality that that does not exist in that form, can be rough. It can be a difficult time. And there's a lot of things, not just that, but a lot of things like society puts pressures on us to have produced, to have a certain amount of wealth or uh, assets, to be able to buy our own home, to be able to buy a new car, to not be dependent on other people and needing help, as ways of measuring our worth. And these are all artificial means. They may have value in a society that's trying to keep on running, but when it comes to your spiritual development and evolution and learning to become clear, it's not that they're stumbling blocks so much, but they can become that if that's the focus. If we have these things in our head that we have to achieve in order to be found worthy to survive, to live, to participate, to attract, all of those things. And so, we worry about what we look like. Some people may like the way we wear our hair. Some people may hate the way we wear our hair. Some people might like the clothes we wear. Some other people might hate the clothes we wear. It doesn't matter what it is, because you'll always be able to find some people who value and appreciate what you're doing where you're at, and another group of people that will equally dislike and disparage what you're doing and where you're at, because they are also projecting. And that idea of acceptance, needing to have acceptance from other people, is probably one of our biggest stumbling blocks, because it makes us vulnerable to uh, manipulation, emotional manipulation from other people. And it doesn't mean that we're clear. Yeah. It's not the right criteria by which to decide. And becoming clear takes a lot of effort, a lot of time, and doesn't happen all at once. I'm sure that there are stages, although I'm not entirely sure what they are. I know I've gone through a lot of different stages where, somebody was hurting my feelings, and I was devastated, and how could they do this to me because they say they love me, and all these inner conflicts about the concepts that I had absorbed from fairy tales, TV shows, movies, my parents, um, who knows, all kinds of places. And I was trying to, succeed at being what everyone else wanted me to be, that kind of thing. And it's amazing how much time gets wasted in that attempt. And it's part of the growing process. So wherever you or I happen to be at, it's not a comparison kind of thing. That's not what this is about. This is about your own personal journey, where you're at, and figuring out ways to get to a place where certain things don't affect you the way they do now. So, um, we've talked a little bit about some of those social imperatives that people have, like with women, being, having children, getting married, fulfilling that, I guess, contract to continue the species kind of thing, and attract a mate says something about how valuable you might be to the gene pool or whatever, although I don't think we use those exact terms. But that's really what's going on, I think, anyway, in our minds. And so for me, when the tree reached out and communicated with me and comforted me, that was a serious breakthrough, because then that gave me something outside of myself and outside of people that I could look to and realize that they didn't have the same expectations that people did. I wasn't being measured and judged and, weighed and all this other stuff to decide whether or not I should or exist, and if it was okay for me to take up space in the world. The trees didn't have that kind of an attitude at all, which was extremely freeing. So being able to identify something outside of people and outside of ourselves as being that kind of accepting, I think is a good step. Finding way to do that can help a lot, because if your self-worth is all bound up with these external things, status symbols, and you know other people's opinions and so forth of you, then you don't have the freedom to explore who you want to be, because you're constantly trying to fulfill other people's expectations, and it's hard in families, and age wise. The younger you are, the more difficulty you might have with overcoming that, because it's sort of ingrained from childhood and the way society is structured. Um, and for me, it's like figuring out first, who did I want to be. That was a very important step. What kind of a person did I want to be? I needed to define that. And some of the things I came up with were, I wanted to be compassionate and kind. I wanted to be strong and resilient. I wanted to be determined, like unique me, um, but without pressuring others to be like me. I don't know exactly how to explain that. Uh, Knowing what is my responsibility and what is not is important in this process of being clear. Because if you think that everything that happens around you, be it weather or other people's emotional reactions to what you're going through or how you're feeling or who you are, um, that those are all your responsibility, then it's not possible to become a clear person, because you're always trying to assuage everyone else and make them feel comfortable, instead of learning how to be comfortable in your own life, in your own skin, in your own head. Um, yeah, not an easy subject. Of course, nothing important is easy. Isn't that the way it works? So, thinking about it, I have noticed that often communication is difficult in all, no matter what the circumstances. Communication is fraught with the potential for misunderstanding, because people have different understandings of different words, different experiences, and so forth. And they have, like, most people have got like a collection of thought processes, thought forms, hopes, desires, needs, things that they compare something to when it comes in, to see if it fits this particular category or this other category, if they're being um, talked down to, or uh, misled, or whatever it happens to be. So the words come out of someone's mouth and they come toward you, and you hear the words, but do you actually hear the words? The words might be the same, but your response to them may be completely different, depending on all of those things that you have as a collection around you, that those words generate reactions from, bounce off of, and so forth. And then by the time you finish absorbing the words, it's turned into something the other person has no idea what it's turned into. It's like not the same thing. It's really obvious with people who struggle with mental illness, because their internal landscape is already filled up with so many different things, so many fears, anxieties, thoughts, and processes and stuff like that, that it becomes very apparent when you say something simple like, I made you a cup of soup, have some soup, help warm you up because you're hungry. And this happened to us with Ian's sister, and she's like, I think you've poisoned my soup. When there's really no real indication that anyone has put anything in her soup or poisoned her soup. We have no intention of trying to harm her. These are all things that are happening inside of her own head, her own reality, and have nothing to do with the world as it is outside of her, which is one of the tragedies of that, because that means she's living in an existence where um, all these people are trying to harm her, whether and mostly nobody is. And there's maybe some people she now knows and are hanging out with that are taking advantage of that and delight in harming people. But in general, most of that's happening in her own brain. Um, I had that happen to me in Texas when I was down in Texas when I did that big ritual that opened up the portal between the worlds, and the tribe warrior troop uh, of natives crossed over all at the same time and pierced that veil for me. When I was talking to the owner, one of the owners of the property, to get permission to do this, I felt I needed to have her permission, and I would start talking to her, and then suddenly she would flip into this strange mode where I represented this other woman that had been pregnant, that they had decided to help and take care of, and then had abused the privilege of being there with them and taken from them and never given anything back. And it was very odd. And I would see it happen. I mean, I could actually see it start to go from my words to her heart to my words to this mass of stuff in her head and not making it to her heart. And I kept breaking, doing things to break through and acknowledge, I understand that this person did terrible things to you, and I'm really sorry that that happened. I am not her. This is why I'm here. This is what we're trying to do. I have no intention of taking advantage of you. And miracle, it worked. I don't know that that works often. It was one of those moments where I was getting help from other places. I suspect my staff was with me, and it was really early on. I had just received my staff, like I think the week before. so, so that was a pretty interesting test experience with that. And but it sort of highlights how that happens, where people, generally speaking, are all in their own head experiencing reality that isn't real except in their own head. And if you're going to be using magic, dealing with spirit beings, maybe deities, or whatever, we've talked about the need to know yourself. And one of the things about that is becoming clear on who you are. You cannot know yourself unless you are clear. When we talk about boundaries, that's partly how you create boundaries, by knowing who you are. If you don't know what is and is not okay for you, that you've chosen is okay or is not okay, then you can't create a boundary with it. If you're still struggling with a concept about how to do something or what you want to do, and you talk to 10 people, and the 10 people give you 10 different things that they think you should be doing with that, and you don't have like a baseline in yourself, that's very confusing, because then you have all these different things to choose from. And it's like it goes with everything. So I my body hates green peppers and red peppers and yellow peppers and hot stuff. My body doesn't like hot stuff. And I've actually gotten into almost fist fights in a restaurant with people, just trying to order the food that my body can eat. Where, okay, so one dinner I was at, um, this woman I didn't know very well, she was with a friend of mine, so we all sort of went together to this restaurant. And, I've been to this restaurant before, I've ordered food from this restaurant before. I'm a fully grown adult, surprise. I know my taste, it's my body. So she says this, and points to this sandwich, is the best thing that they make. You should order this. And I look at this, and it has bell peppers and hot peppers and onions and all sorts of things my body doesn't like. So I'm trying to go like, well, I can't eat that because, it's hot. They're not hot. And then she starts to argue with me. That's another thing. There's no reason to tell people your reason. Don't tell people the reason, because whatever you say, they will try and argue you out of your reason. So because I gave her a reason, then there was this like back and forth kind of thing. And, she's telling me it's not hot, and I'm telling her it doesn't matter if it's hot, if it's. So finally I said, look, I said, red pepper, yellow pepper, green pepper, hot pepper, not hot pepper, black pepper, any kind of pepper. I don't eat it. And then she wouldn't speak to me for, I don't know, 5 years or something like that. So, what kind of a thing is going on in her head? I imagine that in her head, she has offered me this wonderful piece of wisdom that she has, because she's been to this restaurant so often and she knows what the best food is. And she has taken this best food and put her own self worth and acceptance into the idea of this meal. And I have rejected it, and therefore I have rejected her. And I've created this huge, giant thing. And really, it had nothing to do with me, except for the fact that I happen not to like those foods, and I created a situation. But that's a good example of how it's like it's spread throughout our subconscious and in all of our interactions with people. Another thing to look for, one of the things to try and be aware of, is when you see someone and you think they remind you of someone you think, try and figure out who they remind you of, because who they remind you of can be very important. If they remind you of someone that you've had negative encounters with, you're going to be predisposed to not liking that person, regardless of whether or not you might have been the best of friends otherwise. And it doesn't mean that you have to like let everybody have a chance no matter what, but to be aware of it is the important part in this. You can still reject having anything to do with them, because the face that comes up every time you see them and all the memories that are associated with it is just too much stuff right now for you to process and deal with and make room for someone who looks kind of like them. And that's perfectly fine. You don't owe anyone anything when it comes to that. That's not what's important. But to become conscious of those um, associations that your experience, brain, or whatever makes, like, it can be a color that you don't like that someone is wearing. It can be anything. Um, and sometimes you don't even know you're doing it. I know, like, after my father passed, I discovered, to my surprise, that I had been searching the crowd, um, whenever there were men in the crowd, and scanning each man's face very carefully and comparing it to my memory of my father's face to make sure it wasn't him, because he was such a terrifying person. And as long as he was still alive, I knew there was a chance he might find me, not like I was hiding. Um, and I did not know what would happen if that was the case. And when he passed, I suddenly stopped doing that. And it was the cessation of doing that that made me aware of the fact that I'd been doing that since I was 17. So, it's you don't always become aware of these things. Like I said, it's a process. It's not like you wake up one day and you go like, I am perfectly clear. And nothing will bother me ever again. It's not how it works. But it's a series of steps. That's partly what shadow work is about, identifying the things in yourself first that you don't like, and then helps you identify things in others maybe that would give you a problem. But it isn't just about that part. It's about the things we like as well as the things that we don't like. It's not one thing or the other. It's like everything together. And ideally, when you do the work and you progress and you learn more things and so forth, you get to the point where someone else's opinion, whether they don't like your spell work or they don't like the name you chose for yourself or they don't like the color you dyed your hair or the color of the clothes that you wear or your financial status or your sexual identity or any number of other things, um, at some point, hopefully, you get to that stage where you don't care what they think anymore. And what they think doesn't matter to you because you know yourself. You know who you are. You know your own heart, your own mind. You know your intentions. You know um, your relationship, that energy connection that you have with the universe. You know that the universe knows you and um, sees who you are. When you can see who you are, it really helps everything. And of course, I think that they, always have seen who we are. It's us that get in our own way, that try and clog ourselves up. And this is part of the reason why some people have such a difficult time with silence and stillness. I think it's because my granddaughter has this issue. She cannot go to sleep unless her phone is on and things are playing in the background. And I think that it stems from some of her own traumatic memories and so forth. And as long as there's something external that distracts her mind and keeps her even peripherally engaged, then she can keep those things at bay and not have to, have them come up all the time, which is also legitimate. There's nothing wrong with deciding I am not emotionally, spiritually, or mentally capable right now of dealing with this amount of stuff. So I'm going to take this stuff and I'm going to put it over here and I'm going to do what I can to sort of bolster myself, heal myself, get myself where I want to be. And then maybe I can break this thing up into smaller pieces and deal with a little bit at a time. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's not like you have to suddenly strip away everything and you're done. So, um, when you do become clear, it's a wonderful thing. And I feel like I'm clear. I'm sure there's more clarity that I can learn over time, but I'm fairly clear at this point. Where, like, my granddaughter, when I'm trying to wake her up and she's grumpy, she's like angry and kind of like has a tone in her voice and so forth. And I'm like, yeah, right, okay. This has nothing to do with me. This is what's going on inside of her, and it doesn't impact me much at all. It impacts Ian more because he gets, protective of how I'm being treated, which is another projection, but that's fine. I can, just go like, no, don't worry about it. Everything's fine. And it's with everything else. It's like mostly we don't know each other. We are spending some quality time together on our channel. I am definitely sharing some intimate and deep stuff with everybody here, but I'm multidimensional and there's lots to me than just the stuff I share. I hope the stuff I share is important for other people, something that they can relate to and use and figure out for their own lives. But whether they do or not, it doesn't matter to me. It's like, this is it. This is who I am. This is where I'm at. And I know I'm not perfect. And I'm not here to make decisions for anyone else. That's why I try to share my actual experiences rather than theoretical stuff. Uh, I personally find that more valuable than, some psychological theory or magical theory or what have you. Um, because we're all on such different paths. I mean, every single individual out there is on a somewhat different path. Everybody is at a different stage of development, has different challenges that they're having to meet, different life situations that they're in, uh, different trauma that they have to deal with. And, I think some of the universality of the stuff I talk about is one of the things that gets the right people to my channel, and I hope that this is a service to everyone, that they get something out of it. But remember, you have to do the work yourself. I can't do it for you. No one else can do it for you. And it kind of concerns me when people go to psychics and get told things like, oh, you had this many different lifetimes, or you're in an alternate reality having a great time right now, or whatever. And and I see all those things as sort of like my granddaughter's playing something, distractions, because they're not about the here and now. I mean, getting into reality, into the here and now, means you don't need to worry about parallel lives or past lives or future lives or ascension or any of that stuff, because what becomes important when you're becoming clearer is what's right in front of your face. Like, what can you do? What can you pick up? What are the things that cross your path that interest you and that you want to know more about? What do those things have uh, for you? And, not everyone's going to be a concert pianist or a famous artist or a songwriter or, a famous scientist or a theoretical physicist or whatever. And we all have strengths and weaknesses and things to decide how to deal with and what we're going to do. But the important thing is trying to be in the life you're in the moment, in this reality, in this now, and using that as sort of a litmus test for whether something is important. So I heard the latest conspiracy theory, which was not about COVID, so that was a refreshing change. And this was about the underwater volcano eruption in Tonga. And apparently, someone on the internet has decided that this was too big to actually be natural, which I thought was hysterical, considering how powerful volcanoes can be and have been in the past, you know, um, being a natural force the way they are. And so it must have been a government testing out a new weapon. I think they decided it was a kinetic based weapon. And I'm thinking about this, I try to think these things through. It's like, so, okay, so if this was true, why are you talking about it? Because, if this is actually true, they're going to know you're talking about it. And if this is a secret government project and you're talking about it, they're going to do something about it. And the next big kinetic experimental weapons test might be in your backyard. So, that part of me goes, this is not a good idea. But it's part of that litmus test kind of thing. For one thing, do you know anyone who's actually in the program? Do you have any actual sources? Are you in a position of power and authority where you can actually change uh, the direction that things are going, influence the science, if that's what it is, experimentation or, whatever? Um, I try to use that to decide what I want to spend my time on. Because if I'm not in a position to influence something, all I'm doing is spitting air out and making sound waves with absolutely no effect in any way, shape, or form. It's just a bunch of noise. So, it's like I needed to crochet in order to help heal my hand. I was great. I figured that out. I need to keep crocheting. So, what am I going to make? So, I'm making scarves and hats for the homeless in my area, because I get to exercise my hand and keep on going while I'm deciding other projects I might do later, and then someone else can get some value out of it as well. It just seems like a good thing to do. And giving back, I think, is important. I consider that uh, the Native American attitude towards us being caretakers is something I embrace. And it's like the idea that the life we've been given is the greatest gift that can be. And the universe has no obligations to us after that. They gave us this gift of being able to become conscious and aware and interact with it. and so forth. And so we owe it to try and help it, to make it better, to improve it, to appreciate it, uh, to take care of it. And that's an attitude I like, an attitude I try to embrace. And you can change yourself if you decide there's something about you don't like. I'm working right now on trying to change the conversation from the casual violence of Darwinian theories and how that sort of minimizes the impact of death for other people right now. And I think that, I don't know if it's a good theory or not. And I think for the time right now, it doesn't work for me. So I'm trying not to think along those lines. I've decided that where that leads me is a place I don't like. And that's another thing. You can look at stuff and decide, is this going to lead me down a dark hole somewhere? That at the bottom of it, I'm not going to be able to find my way back out without help because I don't know how I got here and I don't know how to get back. If I decide when I'm down there I don't like it anymore, I mean, yeah. Anyway, the other night, 2 nights ago, I had this amazing dream. There were lots of people there. This was the first dream I've had with lots of people. There were like sections of people. We were putting them in different sections in my dream. But it was like a big, giant space, and there were like groups of people all over the place. And I spontaneously began to sing about creation and love. And it was a fantastic song. The words were coming and they all rhymed and it was a wonderful tune. And then I started to become aware of the fact that I was dreaming. And then I suddenly thought, oh my God, I'm making up this song. And am I going to be able to continue rhyming it? And then I woke myself up because I was worrying so much. It's like, oh no, I don't know if there's another line that I can rhyme. And then I forgot the song. So, it's funny. But I felt good when I woke up from the dream. It just had this kind of connection going that love is the creative force of the universe, and that's the love of the energy of love, the creation form, force, or what have you. So I just thought that was great. Just a little thing boop, like that, and then on to the next. So I can tell you that the more clear you become, the easier life is as far as knowing what part is your responsibility. And when things are not your responsibility, it becomes easier to let go of them. Because there's no point in trying to use all of your energy to take care of something that isn't yours to take care of. Just sort of like spitting in the wind. And that's part of self-definition. And I think self-defined people are a lot more interesting because at least they've thought about it and they've made a choice. There's nothing wrong with having a position and a certainty about things for your own life. As long as you're not trying to impose them on other people's lives and think that your certainty is the only certainty that matters and everyone else ought to agree with you, because that's not going to happen. We're too diverse. So hopefully this has been helpful. Like usual, I just sort of start on the subject and it sort of takes me where it does. But everybody stay clear out there and know that anything you think I meant, if you thought it meant directly related to you, probably had nothing to do with you at all. And it's just in your own mind. So take what you need and leave the rest, and that is perfectly fine. So this has been Siofra's Magic Alcove, and I'm Siofra Bradigan. Blessed be.